All right, we are diving straight into what I think is just an absolute mystery today. I want you to picture three totally separate things. We've got French peasants from the year 944 AD, a Swiss chemist from 1943, and modern high-speed fiber optic cables. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth could those three things possibly have in common? Well, it turns out they all hold the exact same secret about the physical infrastructure of the human mind.
Just listen to this intense warning from the legendary underground chemist Alexander Shulgin. He actually wrote this down in his private notebooks after synthesizing a compound so profound, he felt it literally shouldn't exist in the public record. And this right here immediately sets the stakes for our explainer today, because we aren't just talking about, abstract psychology. We are looking at the literal physical architecture of human perception and how it can, theoretically, be permanently reprogrammed.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, the fungal master key. Second, the fiber optic brain. Third, the cipher position. Fourth, the 128 crayon system. And finally, number 5, the architecture of autonomy.
Okay, Section 1. The fungal master key, how a medieval plague mapped the brain. To really understand this, we actually have to begin our mapping in the dirt of medieval France.
Back in 944 AD, tens of thousands of people suddenly went completely mad. They were suffering these excruciating seizures, severe hallucinations, and terrifyingly, many literally watched their own limbs blacken and detach. But it wasn't a curse or a traditional plague. It was a parasitic fungus hiding right in their daily rye bread. This horrific condition was known historically as St. Anthony's fire, and it struck in two very distinct ways. You had the gangrenous form, which destroyed blood circulation and caused those lost limbs, and then you had the convulsive form, which basically short-circuited the central nervous system entirely. Now, history often falsely blames this exact same fungus, which is called ergot, for the Salem witch trials. But historians have definitively proved that Salem, which was a dairy-rich farming community, had abundant vitamin A, and that entirely rules out biological poisoning in favor of a purely sociological panic. History absolutely demands nuance, but the fungus's real impact on the physical brain is pure biology.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens chemically. Ergot and its later derivative LSD, which was synthesized by Albert Hofmann, share what's called a tryptamine backbone. It's a very specific chemical shape. I want you to think of your brain's thalamus as a nightclub bouncer, and the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors are the velvet rope, right? They're constantly filtering out millions of pieces of totally irrelevant sensory data every single second. Well, that tryptamine shape perfectly mimics a master key that essentially distracts the bouncer, completely dropping the velvet rope and just flooding your visual cortex with raw, unedited reality.
Moving right into Section 2, the fiber optic brain, the literal wiring of human consciousness. Because if our brains are capable of receiving and transmitting all of this hyper-connected light, geometry, and imagery when those filters drop, what do the physical wires inside our dark skulls actually look like?
For the longest time, there was this old assumption that the brain's white matter, specifically the myelin, was just dumb, static insulation wrapped around a wire, sort of like the rubber on a power cord. But recent neurobiology completely shatters that idea. It reveals myelin as a highly dynamic, living network capable of absolutely incredible plasticity. It's an integrated functional unit.
And here is where it gets seriously mind-bending. A radical manifesto out of Stanford proposes applying Albert Einstein's 1905 quantum theory of light directly to this living network in your head. They suggest that cellular metabolism inside the brain generates ultra-weak quantized packets of light called biophotons. So these aren't just biological exhaust fumes, they actually function as a physical mechanism of near light-speed communication right inside your brain.
And the absolute proof of this lies in this exact number, 1.44. That happens to be the precise refractive index of your brain's myelin sheath. Because the fluid inside the axon has a lower refractive index, the myelin basically acts as a perfect mirror tunnel, creating total internal reflection. Think about what that means. Your brain is structurally and mathematically identical to a commercial fiber optic internet cable. The light literally doesn't leak out. It just bounces perfectly down the neural pathway.
And to manage all of that data, there's this incredible mechanism known as the action potential tuning dial. Your brain dynamically tunes the actual speed of your thoughts. It actively adjusts the length and the thickness of these biological fiber optic cables to aim data precisely where it needs to go. This ensures that different signals from totally different parts of the brain arrive at their target simultaneously. You are constantly, physically rewiring your own network.
Which brings us to Section 3, the cipher position. How to write data to the light network. Because now that we've seen this unbelievable hardware, we have to look at how underground chemists managed to code the ultimate software for it.
The chemist Alexander Shulgin made an astonishing discovery. By shifting atoms on a molecule to the exact 2, 4, and 5 positions, he unlocked a kind of cipher. He realized that positions 2 and 5 act like solid anchors, literally holding the cognitive loop open in the brain. But position 4, that is the open music dial. By changing just one single atom at position 4, maybe swapping a bromine for an ethyl group, he could use it as a collision parameter, basically a steering wheel. He was literally aiming different cognitive loops, like a conductor's baton, to create feelings of overwhelming warmth, or deep analytical clarity, or even intense synesthesia.
Now this beautifully contrasts the mainstream scientific view with Shulgin's reality. The mainstream framework, known as the Rebus model, assumes these mind-altering compounds basically just relax the brain, flattening the system and letting in a bunch of random noise. But the RVI model, drawn from Shulgin's actual journals, argues the exact opposite. It says no way, these compounds don't just relax the brain. They are precision tools used to engineer, aim, and construct entirely specific new realities.
And this takes us to Section 4, the 12-8 crayon system, installing a new operating system. So what happens when you combine this hyper-targeted molecular chemistry with an intensely specific, multisensory educational framework? Can we actually format the hard drive of the human mind?
Enter the 128 crayon system. This is a theoretical framework designed to install perfect pitch and syntax directly into the brain by creating totally indestructible memories. And it does this by binding 6 different senses all at exactly the same time. Let's take the lowest C on a piano, for example. You don't just hear the note, you see it as cherry red. You feel your thumb press into the earth, and crucially, you smell a specific blend of cherry, static electricity, and rain. The reason it relies so heavily on scent is because olfactory data completely bypasses that nightclub bouncer in the brain and goes straight to the hippocampus, setting up the memory architecture instantly.
Now, kids can do this pretty easily because their brains are highly plastic, right? But adults are locked out by something called DNA hypermethylation. Think of it as a biological superglue that seals our adult chromatin, basically locking the brain's architecture to prioritize stability over that childhood sponge-like plasticity. However, the source documents for this explainer describe an incredibly risky, highly theoretical underground protocol that used valproic acid to chemically melt this superglue. The idea was to thrust the adult brain back into a state of childhood plasticity just long enough so this completely new operating system could be installed permanently.
The architect behind this whole cognitive system, a woman named Eveline Coté, had this amazing quote. She said, "Every brand is a ventriloquist, and every customer is a snail." She deeply understood that language itself is basically a software virus. If you can format a mind, you can control it. And she actually proved this concept in real life by hacking a courtroom's reality. She fed poetic syntax through a hidden earpiece to a gangster who was testifying. Now, he was completely sober, just running on 3 Advil, but he became utterly convinced he was chemically altered just by the sheer context and the words she was feeding him. She proved the mind is just a highly receptive machine waiting for the right input.
Which leads us directly to our final section, Section 5, the architecture of autonomy. Who holds the admin rights? As we marvel at this insane capacity for cognitive terraforming, the critical question shifts violently from whether we can reprogram the mind to whether we ethically should.
The truly terrifying realization here is the concept of capture. The author William S. Burroughs pointed out that if you can perfectly bind a color to a piano key using these sensory frameworks, you could just as easily bind a political ideology or a consumer desire directly into someone's physical brain tissue. So you have to ask, who gets access to this upgrade? Does it make us more free? Or does it just make us more efficient machines performing for whoever happens to hold the admin rights?
To answer that, the source texts offer a pretty brutal observation of a desert toad, the Ancilia salvarius, that was captured by smugglers. Rather than live safely inside a plastic tub, the toad literally chewed off its own limb to escape. It sacrificed its physical body for freedom. And honestly, this serves as the ultimate warning for all of us. True loyalty is to your own autonomy. You must never surrender the architecture of your mind to an engineered cage, no matter how beautifully constructed that cage might be.
So, I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought to mull over today.
We have gone from medieval bread fungus all the way to the physics of fiber optic light bouncing around inside your skull. We are actively learning to draw the blueprints of our own reality. But as we gain the power to write perfectly formatted code into our own neural pathways, are we really upgrading the human experience, or are we just erasing the beautiful, unpredictable ghost inside the machine? Thanks so much for exploring this fascinating explainer with me today. Keep questioning the architecture around you, and for sure, keep questioning the architecture inside you.